and welcome to the 5th annual meeting of the Tallahassee Black Republicans.
I present tonight's speaker.
Now is Republican Congressman Byron of Florida. Donald, by the way, introduced DeSantis at his election night victory party in November. Last month, he became one of 11 Florida congressional Republicans to endorse Donald Trump. Congressman Donald, welcome to Meet the Press.
It's good to be with you, Chuck.
Black Republican mother... I want to talk about Chuck Todd and Representative Byron Donalds. This was fun to watch.
Are you going to be comfortable with a deal that you probably personally won't like, but it's a deal that sort of maybe progressives don't like and the Freedom Caucus doesn't like, but it can pass? Are you going to be able to accept a deal like that?
Chuck, to be blunt with you, we're not really sure what deal is even on the table. The White House is not serious. They came out with a proposal to spend another $30 billion.
Oh, he's so pretty and prim, just like Republicans like them boys.
Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm pissed. I am royally pissed. The liberal media thinks that Republicanism is not for black people. Now, you tell me.
Look, Joe Biden is saying that he's cut $1.7 trillion from the deficit, but everybody's saying that's not true.
Actually, it's $1.6 trillion that, according to Joe Biden's budget, we're cutting immediately.
The COVID spending in the last year of President Trump, that Congress wasn't going to extend that, and Joe Biden did.
Nothing more than a hack. Surprise, surprise. That's the only kind of them boys they would accept.
Now, you tell me, what about fiscal responsibility, a strong national defense, and limited government is unappealing to black people? We're not a monolith.
Oh my, oh my. Get ready for quite a ride of bullshit.
So we're in a situation right now where the only plan in Washington has been passed by the House of Representatives. It's the only plan. Joe Biden's not serious at the negotiating table. I've talked with my colleagues who are in that room. So at this point, really the question is, what's the Senate going to do? Where's Chuck Schumer in all this? Because the Senate has not done any work at all, and Joe Biden has not done any work at all.
What do you get you to respond?
Y'all have shown us no budget because y'all have got nothing. You've got a bunch of chest thumpers and knuckle draggers who, by God, are going to hold the line on spending. Not when Trump was president, of course, just when a Democrat's in office. After we go ahead and run up the bill, we're going to leave. According to the Constitution, the budget comes from the House. Get your shit in order. What are you doing? This guy is full of shit. He's got a little sheet of talking points, and by God, he's going to stick to them.
I can't imagine anybody ever even thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge.
Why don't you agree with him on this?
Well, first of all, he also said the other day on a rival network that he said that when he was president, and when asked why he wasn't saying it now, he said because he's not president. Listen, Donald Trump is always negotiating.
Do you realize how absurd that sounds?
Be careful now, boy. Don't you piss off our leader.
That's how absurd that sounds?
That is not absurd.
How is
He's
that not
always
absurd? It's
negotiating,
absurd.
Chuck. He's always negotiating. That's what
This guy knows it's absurd. But if he were to say that, they would lynch him. What's good for the goose is never good for the gander. Especially if you're in a dressing room.
That's actually one of the reasons why so many deals for our country worked out to our benefit as compared to his predecessors, both Republican and Democrat, because he's always negotiating.
Do you realize how partisan that sounds?
That's not a partisan statement.
What is good for me is not for thee.
Listen,
he's basically saying when I'm president, there's no negotiating on this. But hey, when somebody else is president, screw him.
Well, no, here's the thing. Let's be realistic.
Trump negotiations. Get the fuck out of here. He's the worst negotiator in the history of the world. He never accomplished anything. My God, it was still infrastructure week after Biden was president. Oh, wait, that's right. He did do an infrastructure bill, didn't he? Healthcare bill, too.
We come in all different shapes and sizes.
You do. When Donald Trump was negotiating debt ceiling with Nancy Pelosi, mind you.
Yeah, I remember Trump negotiating over the budget. How'd that go?
Negotiated that.
No, they didn't. They raised it without any restrictions.
When they were doing that, our economy was thriving. Our debt levels were not where they are right now. We were about $24 trillion, not $32 trillion.
Trump spent $7 trillion of that debt. This guy knows it. He just said it. $7 trillion. That's 25% of all the debt we've had since World War II. Trump did that in 4 years. Another 20% of it came from Bush a few years before that. Democrats pay off the debt. Republicans run up the bill.
We're not getting our message out. obviously.
You have $32 trillion on the credit card, and all House Republicans are saying is, let's go back to pre-pandemic.
But there's one more thing House Republicans are asking for, which is they want fewer IRS agents. They want fewer attempts to try to properly get tax receipts into the federal government's coffers. I have never understood the resistance of extra IRS agents unless you knowingly cheat on your taxes.
First of all, that's salacious, and you know that.
However, I am pissed. Royally pissed. Indeed.
Families aren't cheating on their taxes. Guys like this are cheating on their taxes. Guys who pay this guy are cheating on their taxes. And the guys who bought this guy don't pay any taxes at all.
Most Americans, by far, pay their taxes and they do it honorably.
We're not talking about most Americans. We're talking about billionaire donors. We're talking about billionaire industrialists. We're talking about people who drill holes in the ground, shit all over our land, and haven't paid taxes in 40 years. It's about time they paid their fair share.
The Republican Party is and should be the only home for black voters.
What House Republicans, and frankly the Republican Party, is concerned about is having IRS agents go after middle-class families and small business owners. When you have that many more agents, it's not to go after the rich.
I guess when this guy was spouting his bullshit, he didn't know Joe was going to throw a wrench into his plans.
It's to go after the middle class. That's what it's for.
So if you're paying what you're supposed to pay, then you should have nothing to fear.
You would make the assumption that IRS audits are up, that they're putting out more liens on the American people. That's not true. That data's not there. All Joe Biden's trying to do is find every possible nickel out of every couch from every American to pay for his radical spending.
Oh, Joe Biden's going to come into your couch and get out every little last nickel. Fuckstick. Billionaires don't keep their money in a couch. They keep it in a money bin. Don't you watch the news?
More than CBO actually projected. The economy grew another 1%
fairness,
over
we can't
projections.
litigate the tax cuts because of what happened with COVID. We don't know how much this ate into everything, but it certainly looks like there were going to be fewer revenues coming into the government, but we don't know. In fairness,
fewer revenues now.
There's no ability to litigate this because of what happened with COVID.
This guy's just lying. The fact is, they have no intention of doing anything that wasn't already pre-approved by Trump. That's why they want to go back to the old budgets.
As much of a percentage of our economy than we ever have as a nation. That was 2019. Tax receipts are still up.
You realize that President Trump has added more to the deficit than Joe Biden.
You're
Some of it's COVID. Some of it's COVID.
Most of it is COVID. Let's be clear with the people.
About half of it's COVID and half of it's the tax cut.
That is not true because we raised more revenue. We raised more revenue than CBO projected. If you bring in more money than your projections are, how are you adding to your deficits, John?
Yeah, but somehow y'all managed to do it. Go figure.
Hey, if somehow you keep cutting taxes but more revenue comes into the government, that math doesn't work over time. You can have it in the first year due to some various accounting tricks, but it doesn't work over time.
No, Chuck, that is not true.
Trickle-down economics. My God, we've heard it for 1,000 years, and Republicans are going to spout it for 1,000 more. How long a Reich lasts? I think they want it to be 1,000 years. I don't know. I'm not in the cult.
The purpose of tax policy is to raise revenue for the federal government, not to equalize society.
Oh, send in the black man.
Do you want to see caps on defense spending as well as domestic?
Oh, there certainly won't be any caps on defense. They have to raise Raytheon's pay. And what about United Defense? Especially United Defense.
Because right now there seems to be a dispute whether there's going to be budget caps only on domestic or Republicans are also wanting caps on defense spending.
So internally, we're having this discussion about defense. We're looking at trying to see a way to keep defense spending in line because, you know, there are threats all over the globe. We see it in Ukraine. We see what's happening with China's saber rattling with Taiwan, etc.
Back to the reality of politics. Tom Cole said, any deal is going to lose people like you in the Freedom Caucus. He said, we're not going to have a deal if the President of the United States doesn't sign it, and we're not going to have a deal if a majority of the House doesn't support it. So each side's not going to just simply give the other side what it wants. It's politics 101. I go back to my first question. You accept that premise?
I accept the premise that Joe Biden's got to come up with a deal.
I don't know if you noticed, but the Constitution says that all budgets come from the House, not the Senate. This guy's never read a Constitution. He's a Republican. Republicans talk about the Constitution all the time. They say how much they love it, but none of them have ever read it. Well, let me tell you something else. It also says that the United States will never default, cannot default. It is illegal to default. The 14th Amendment does not seem like an option to me, because I would think that grown-ups would prevail at some point. Unfortunately, Republicans are going to do what Republicans are going to do. And Joe will save America. And a Democrat will save the day, as they always do.
If he has a plan, if he has a strategy. The only thing he's ever said is it should just be clean. But nobody with an economic mind is saying, yeah, sure, just give the federal government a blank check.
Oh, please.
So are you comfortable with breaching the debt ceiling?
No, I'm not comfortable with that. This should have been done 100 days ago. House Republicans have been working on this for 3 months. I've been in the room, I've been in those meetings. And while we were working on a strategy to raise our nation's debt ceiling, which is something the House of Representatives has passed, Joe Biden was ignoring it. And Chuck Schumer was ignoring it. And I think that he has been derelict in his
It's such bullshit. This guy knows it. He knows it better than anyone. What about the Senate? The Senate should be doing their part. By golly, the Senate. Read the fucking Constitution.
Excuse me, gentlemen. Sorry to interrupt. Someone's white wife is here to pick them up?
Was her name Emily?
Let me ask you about the presidential race. We got off more on the debt ceiling than I think either one of us expected. I want to play your celebration of Governor DeSantis and ask you about it on the other side. Here it is.
The newly re-elected, Democrat-beaten, freedom standing for America's Governor, Ron DeSantis.
Obviously, you chose to support right now Donald Trump instead of who you described as America's governor there. What could Governor DeSantis have done to convince you to stick with him and not the former?
Well, DeSantis has failed. That's the reason. I mean, DeSantis is over. This guy knows it. He better get on the Trump train before, his career's over.
Look, well, for me, it's not really about Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis. It's about what America needs. And that's where I've been really since day one. I talked a little bit about foreign policy in the last block. We have a situation right now where Russia's on the move and China is on the move. We need somebody who can step in day one, look at Vladimir Putin, look at Xi Jinping and say, okay, enough.
Yeah, I would love to see Trump look Putin into the eye and get tough. Please.
I'm back. We're going to get everything in
You don't
order
think
the way it was
DeSantis has that
before.
ability?
I think it's going to take him time. I think there's only one person who has that ability right now, and it's Donald Trump. And for all the naysayers who would say, oh, he's unpredictable, oh, we don't know what he's going to do, let's be very clear. When he was president of the United States, the world was in a much safer place. Nobody that the world is safer now than when it was when he was president.
We all know Trump sucked his dick. That's why they didn't let anybody in. I hear he worked the shaft pretty good.
You call January 6th a beautiful day. That is not something many people associate January 6th with. You really think that's an electable position?
Look, I think what happened on January 6th was a terrible day for the country.
You don't think it was a beautiful day?
I was on the House floor.
Yeah.
It was a terrible day for the country. Also being said, we have a situation where we got to get the country back on track. I made a comment the other day that as bad as January 6th was, the American people aren't consuming January 6th the way the media in Washington is consuming January 6th.
Yeah, fuck off with that shit. This guy's gonna dodge that question. It was a horrible day for America. Not really the riot, but the fact that Trump wasn't reinstated. We got it, dude. Now, it's time to pivot. You see, he's very well trained. When the questions don't go your way, you pivot. Let's watch.
Our country has to get
Pretty
back on
scarring
track.
in Washington. In fairness to Washington, it was a pretty scarring day for Washington.
It was, but what's happening at our southern border right now? That's scarring for the people who live at the southern border.
Republicans always pivot to the exact same thing. It's the border. My God, the borders have crumbled. They're coming for your children. MS-13's bringing fentanyl into your kids' Halloween candy or whatever the fuck.
That is the stuff that the American people are concerned about right now.
Oh, he's dodging. He's gonna dodge this question too.
There's been some talk that you might be interested in running for governor in 2026. So let me ask you this. Would you have signed a 6-week ban, or do you think that's too much?
Honestly, that's something where you have to deal with your legislature on that. You have to look at your legislature, you have to deal with the people in your state, and you figure out what that process is going to be.
Sounds like that you think 6 weeks is too much.
Well,
You're
they
not
also
comfortable saying.
they also put a lot of exceptions into it. Look,
Yeah.
I wasn't in the legislature when they did this. I want to be blunt with you.
I understand.
I'm not sure where the governor was and the legislature was on this.
Mm-hmm.
What I will tell you is this is a far better place to be than when Roe v. Wade was the law.
Donald
of the
Trump
land.
thinks it's too much. It's too extreme. Do you agree with him on that?
I think he's going to figure out what he thinks is going to be the best thing for the country. He said that already. He's on the record with that. Look, abortion politics is very personal. It's very, very personal. And it's obviously, we all know it's hyperbolic in our country. People are all over the place.
Isn't that a reason not to have government try to get so involved in it?
Well, I would argue
way.
that the Supreme Court already did that. They did that for 50 years, and that's why it was important to return this back to the states, because the country's never really had to deal with the politics of abortion.
That's all Republicans can do nowadays but dodge. That's all they've got. The House is a complete disarray. McCarthy's house party has turned into a fucking riot. And Republicans love themselves a good riot. I'm Zachariah, Lone Star Liberal. Y'all take it easy.
Black Republican mother